Hi everyone! Today we are going to review factoring polynomials. Actually, not review, we're going to actually talk about factoring polynomials. These particular polynomials have 4 terms, so we're going to work on factoring it when we have 4 terms. Okay? Now, the first thing you want to do whenever you're factoring anything at all is to always check for a GCF. That's the first thing you want to do with any type of factoring. So here in this example problem, I want to check for a GCF. If you notice, every single one of these terms has x in it. And I want to look at the smallest x value I have, which is just regular x. So my GCF is going to be x. So if I take an x out, that leaves me with 2x cubed minus 2x squared plus x minus 1. Okay, all I did was factored an x out of each of these terms. Same thing as dividing an x out of each of these terms. Well, that's the first thing you always want to check for. Now, I got to make sure I carry that x through to the end, but I'm not going to do anything with it just yet. I want to look at the 4 terms that are in my polynomial. And what I want to do is I want to check, because in order to factor any polynomial when you have 4 terms, it's called factoring by grouping. And the way that you do that is you're grouping terms together. In order to group the terms together, they have to be in a certain order. And that order is that the product of the outside terms is equal to the product of the inside terms. So you always want to check that first. Product means multiply, so 2x to the third times negative 1 gives me negative 2x to the third. And then if I multiply my inside terms, so negative 2x squared plus x, that also gives me negative 2x to the third. Okay, so I know I'm all set there. Now, I'm not going to do anything with this x right now, but I need to make sure that I include it in my final answer. But what I am going to do is I'm going to group my first 2 terms together and then my second 2 terms together. So if I group my first 2 terms, those are my first 2 terms, and then I'm going to group my second 2 terms. Now what I'm going to do, and this is the same process every time you do these types of problems, all you're going to do is look for the GCF of these 2 terms. Okay, look at your numbers. What number goes into both of these? Well, that's obvious, that's 2. Now look at your x's. You take the smaller of the 2, of x to the third and x squared. X squared is smaller. So that is my GCF of these 2 terms. When I take that out of those 2 terms, what am I left with? So you can do it one of 2 ways. You can divide 2x to the third by 2x squared. Or you could say to yourself, well, what do I have to multiply 2x squared by to get 2x to the third? And that would just be x. So then 2x squared times what gives me negative 2x squared? That would be negative 1. Okay? I'm going to do the same thing over here. I don't have a GCF other than 1. So my GCF here would just be 1. So I'm left with x minus 1. Now here's where you want to stop and check. You can tell if you did it correctly because what you end up with in your binomial should be the same in both of these. If it's not, then you did something wrong. Now from here, all I am doing is I'm simply going to take my GCF out of these 2 terms. Right, out of this term and out of this term. My GCF is what's in parentheses. It's x minus 1. I have to then take my other 2 terms and put them in my other parentheses. So 2x minus 1 times 2x squared gives me this term. And x minus 1 times 1 gives me this term. And so I have factored those 4 terms. Remember, I have to carry that x through because that was the GCF. So I have to put that in. And that is my final answer. I know there's a lot there. I know we did a lot. We're going to do a couple more examples. But I want you to understand what it is that's happening here. You're factoring by grouping. Okay? Let's look at this next example. Again, I'm going to check for a GCF. If you look at all of these terms, you have a GCF, it's x. So if I take out an x, I'm left with 5x to the 5th minus 5x to the 3rd plus x squared minus 1. Okay? Now, we'll deal with that x later. We just have to make sure we include it in our final answer. But right now I want to look at my polynomial and I want to look at my 4 terms. I want to make sure that the product of the outside terms is equal to the product of the inside terms, which it is. I get negative 5x to the 5th on the outside and negative 5x to the 5th on the inside. So I'm going to group my first 2 terms together. And I'm going to group my last 2 terms together. Go to your first 2 terms, take out your GCF. Your GCF, look at the numbers, is going to be 5. And then you're going to take the smaller of the 2 x's, which is x to the 3rd. So what do I have to multiply 5x to the 3rd by to get 5x to the 5th? That would be x squared. Remember, when you multiply things with the same base, you add their exponents. Okay? And then here I have 5x to the 3rd times what gives me negative 5x to the 3rd? Well, that would just be negative 1. If you look over here, I don't have a common factor other than 1, so it would just be 1 times x squared minus 1. Again, notice I have the same thing in my parentheses, which I should have. If I don't, I did something wrong. So I with x squared minus 1. And then in my other set of parentheses, I'm just taking my other 2 terms. 5x to the 3rd plus 1. Don't forget your x that you factored out in the beginning. You factored by grouping. Now this problem, you have to take it one step further because this is factorable. So sometimes what you're left with may be factorable, sometimes it won't. But you have to make sure that you check. X squared minus 1 factors to x plus 1 times x minus 1. So that would be your final answer. Like I said, guys, I know there's a lot there. I know there's a lot going on. We will review this in class tomorrow, but I want to give you kind of a starter of this to kind of get an idea of what's going on, okay? Okay, let's try another one. I have 4x to the 3rd plus x squared minus 8x plus or minus 2. I checked for a GCF. I don't have one here, so there's nothing to factor out to start. Check that the product of your outside terms is equal to the product of your inside terms, which it is. Okay, so I have a negative 8x to the 3rd and negative 8x to the 3rd. So I'm good. I'm going to group my first 2 terms together, and I'm going to group my last 2 terms. Now be careful. This one has a negative 8 as part of this term, so I have negative 8x minus 2. I want to take out, excuse me, sorry guys, I want to take out my GCF of these 2 terms. Okay, there's no number that's common to both, but I do have x's in both, so I'm going to take the smaller of the 2 x's. That would be x squared. That leaves me with 4x plus 1. On the right, look at what you have. You have a negative and a negative. So I want to take out a negative because I have negative common in both terms. I'm also going to take out a number that goes into both 8 and 2. Well, 2 goes into both of those, so I'm taking out a negative 2. And that leaves me with 4x plus 1. Again, look at what you have. You have a common factor here. You should always get that. Okay? So now all I'm going to do is wrap this up. So I have my 4x plus 1. And then my other two factors go in my other parentheses. And that's my final answer. There's nothing else to factor there. Okay, so that's the idea behind factoring polynomials. We're going to review this more tomorrow. So don't panic if you didn't get it all from the video. Your assignment is to do the circled problems on the sheet that I put up on the course page. So print that off, do those circled problems, give it a shot. Like I said, if you don't get it, don't worry about it because we're going to do more of this tomorrow. Okay? Have a great day, everybody. Hopefully my voice will be a little bit better tomorrow. I'll see you then. Bye, everybody.